Sometimes history moves quietly. A single message appears online, people scroll past it, and they think nothing much has changed. But every once in a while, a moment arrives that looks small on the surface, yet carries consequences far bigger than anyone realizes at first. That's exactly what happened on the morning of March 23, 2026. Early that morning, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, posted a message on Truth Social. In all capital letters, he announced that the United States would postpone military strikes on Iran's power plants for 5 days. 5 days. According to the president, there had been very good and productive conversations with Iran. Almost instantly, financial markets reacted. Oil prices dropped. Stock futures surged. Many people saw the news and felt a sense of relief. Maybe the conflict was finally cooling down. And honestly, I hope that's true. Because what we're witnessing is a war that has already shaken the global economy and destabilized an entire region. For more than 3 weeks, fighting between Israel, Iran, and their allies has been escalating. Thousands have been killed. Global energy supplies have been disrupted at levels not seen since the oil crises of the 1970s. And across the Gulf region, countries like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain have been hit by missiles despite never asking to be part of this war. So yes, if diplomacy is opening a door to peace, that is something the world desperately needs. But here's the problem. When one side announces productive negotiations and the other side says those negotiations never happened, that isn't diplomacy. That's messaging. Shortly after Trump's announcement, Iranian officials pushed back. Iran's foreign ministry denied that any direct or indirect negotiations had taken place with the United States. Iranian state media described Trump's message as an attempt to influence global energy prices and buy time for future military action. And suddenly, what looked like a breakthrough began to look far more complicated. To understand why these 5 days matter so much, we need to step back and look at how we got here. The current crisis didn't appear overnight. Its roots go back to the summer of 2025, when Israel and Iran fought a brief but intense 12-day conflict that rattled the entire Middle East. Then, in early 2026, massive protests erupted inside Iran. Political instability was growing. And at the same time, negotiations over Iran's nuclear program were quietly moving forward. Countries like Oman stepped in as mediators. Meetings took place in Muscat and later in Geneva. According to diplomats involved in those talks, progress was actually being made. At one point, Iran reportedly agreed to stop stockpiling enriched uranium and convert its existing material into nuclear fuel instead. That was considered a significant concession. But before those negotiations could fully develop, everything changed. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched a major military operation across Iran. The strikes targeted multiple strategic locations and killed several senior leaders. Among those reported killed was Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. Within days, his son Mojtaba Khamenei was named as his successor. Iran responded exactly as many analysts predicted it would. The country moved to close the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most critical shipping routes in the world. Missile strikes followed across the Gulf region, targeting military bases and energy infrastructure. The result was immediate global shock. According to the International Energy Agency, the disruption to oil supply became the largest energy shock in decades. More than 11 million barrels of oil per day were suddenly removed from global markets. Oil prices surged past $100 per barrel, and gas prices around the world began climbing rapidly. In other words, the world economy was suddenly balancing on a knife's edge. Now fast forward to March 21st. That Saturday, President Trump issued a dramatic ultimatum on Truth Social. He warned that if Iran did not reopen the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours, the United States would hit and obliterate Iranian power plants. Iran immediately responded with its own warning. If the United States attacked Iran's electrical grid, Iranian officials said they would retaliate by striking energy infrastructure and desalination plants across the Gulf. Those desalination plants aren't just industrial facilities. In countries like Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates, they provide most of the population's drinking water. Destroying them wouldn't just disrupt economies. It would threaten the survival of millions of civilians. And that's why the moment on March 23rd became so critical. Just as the 48-hour deadline was about to expire, Trump posted again. He announced that the United States would delay military strikes for 5 days because productive discussions were underway. Markets immediately responded with relief. Oil prices dropped dramatically, and stock markets surged worldwide. But the deeper question remains unanswered. Were there actually negotiations happening? Reports suggest that several countries, including Turkey, Egypt, Oman, and Pakistan, have been quietly passing messages between Washington and Tehran. These are indirect diplomatic channels, sometimes called back-channel diplomacy. But indirect messages are not the same as formal negotiations. And when one government publicly claims talks are progressing, while the other publicly denies those talks exist, it creates a dangerous ambiguity. Because diplomacy relies on trust, clarity, and face-saving for both sides. Public ultimatums make that much harder. Now the world is watching a 5-day countdown. If real negotiations begin, this pause could lead to a ceasefire or even a return to nuclear talks. That would be the best-case scenario. But if the deadline expires and military strikes resume, the consequences could be devastating. Attacking Iran's power grid could plunge tens of millions of people into darkness and trigger retaliatory attacks across the entire Gulf region. There is also a third possibility. The 5-day pause could simply become another extension, followed by another and another, turning the conflict into a slow-burn war with no clear strategy or endgame. And that may be the most dangerous outcome of all. Because wars without clear objectives tend to drag on, expanding slowly until they become impossible to control. Right now, the world is standing inside one of those uncertain moments. 5 days may not sound like much time, but in international politics, 5 days can change everything. The question is not only what happens when the clock reaches zero. The real question is whether the world's leaders will use these 5 days to build a path toward peace, or simply delay the next escalation. History will judge what happens next.